Jane, I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank you for everything that you've done.
Now wait. Do not thank me for what I've done. Don't ever say that to me again.
Okay.
Or to any other pale-faced woman who is doing what we should all be doing.
Right.
Do not make it a salutary thing.
Sure.
That somebody would say racism is a lie, racism is built on a lie, racism needs to end, and it needs to end yesterday.
Right.
But don't ever thank me for what we should all be doing.
Well, then I'll rephrase that. I just wanted to say from the bottom of my heart, I am so thankful that I have the opportunity to sit here with you today, and I was able to watch all of your exercises. I want to go on record to say that you're personally one of my heroes. I had the privilege to watch, your blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise, Eye of the Storm. I've read your books. I've been following your work for quite some time.
You've had a lot of time on your hands.
Yes, I most certainly have.
You should have spent it in a more productive manner, but that's all right.
No, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
On this exciting episode of A Pretty Lie Instead of an Ugly Truth, we are honored to have the legendary Jane Elliott here with us today. For those of you who are not aware, Mrs. Elliott is best known as the teacher who on April 5th, 1968, the day after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, put her third grade students through a bold exercise to teach them about racial prejudice. She divided the children, who were all white, by eye color, and then she told the children that people with brown eyes were smarter, faster, and better than those with blue eyes. What happened next proved to Mrs. Elliott that prejudice is a learned behavior, which means, she says, it can be unlearned. It was an exercise that would catapult her into a heated national discussion, land her on television, newspapers, and eventually make her the subject of half a dozen documentaries and mainstream textbooks. All these years later, Mrs. Elliott hasn't stopped talking about what she learned. She thinks her message is more important than ever amid growing conflict over race. She minces no words. She wants you to listen. Really listen.
Now, for the people at home who don't know who you are, Mrs. Elliott, I was hoping that you would be able to give them a brief synopsis as to how you came up with the blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise and how you got into ultimately all of this.
I'm an 85-year-old, lightly melanated female.
Sure.
Who, a long time ago, 51 years ago, realized after the death of Martin Luther King Jr., that even though I had been raised in an all-white community, I saw people of color as the problem. Instead of seeing skin color not the problem, but paleface's reaction to skin color is the problem. People can't change the color of their skin.
Right.
They can change their attitudes, they can change their behaviors. The problem in this country today, and it's gotten worse in the last 5 years, is ignorance.
Right.
The solution to ignorance, these folks aren't stupid, they're just ignorant. You can't change stupid.
Right.
You can change ignorance with education. I'm an educator. The word educator comes from the root duc, which means lead, the prefix e, which means out, the suffix ate, which means the act of, and the suffix or, which means one who does.
Right.
An educator is one who is engaged in the act of leading people out of ignorance. That is what the schools in this country should have been doing for the last 245 years, and it hasn't been being done. We have been perpetuating ignorance deliberately with the help of the people in local, state, and federal governments. And if you haven't read the book, The Color of Law, every person watching this should get that book today and read it.
Right. Because
then you will understand why. This is not de facto segregation we've got going in this country. It's de jure segregation. And it is perpetuated by our lawmakers.
do you believe that the majority of, I hate to say it, most white people out there who don't understand what's going on is due to ignorance or indoctrination in the school systems, that the school systems isn't educating people properly, and this is what is causing certain individuals to perpetuate racism?
Number one, first, there are no white people on this earth.
Excellent point.
When you look at me, you can see where my skin stops and my shirt begins and my shirt is white.
Right.
This ain't white skin.
Sure.
By any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
There's no such thing as white people. We are all members of the same race, and we all came from those people in sub-Saharan Africa,
right,
who evolved 300,000 to 500,000 years ago. We are all descendants of those people. You and I are 30th to 50th cousins. Right. So, cousin, what was your question?
Well, do
I believe that all melanin challenged people are trained to be racist? Absolutely.
Sure.
And I know that it is expected of us because when I did the blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise in my classroom in Riceville, Iowa, the day after Martin Luther King Jr. was killed, I immediately found out how it feels to teach outside the norm and to teach in opposition to racism. That is not something you are allowed to do in this country. You are forced, if you want to keep your job, to perpetuate the status quo. And the status quo is, if you're white, you're all right. If you're brown, hang around. If you're yellow, you're mellow. And if you're black, get back.
Right.
And that's what we teach in the schools in this country on a daily basis. In this country, what we have is not education. It's indoctrination. And we used to start at the age of 5. Now we start at the age of 3. Because one of our former presidents said, give me a child from the age of 3 to 5 and he'll be mine for a lifetime. And at that point, we started early childhood ed. You think all of these things just happened, or people just have a righteous thinking did these things? No, the person who said that wasn't a righteous thinker. He was saying, if we get them started early, we can keep them thinking this longer. We can subject them to this insanity and to believe in the magic of skin color is to have a slight mental problem.
Right, right. Would you say it's a mental problem?
I would say it is a learned mental problem.
Right.
Racism is a learned response. Nobody is born a bigot.
Right.
There's no gene for racism. There's no gene for sexism, ageism, homophobia, ethnocentrism. Those are all things you have to be carefully taught. And there was a musical play on Broadway many years ago called, you'll know what it was, and the last song is, you have to be taught to be afraid of people whose eyes are differently made, of people whose skin's of a different shade. You have to be carefully taught.
Right.
You have to be taught before it's too late, before you are 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate. You have to be carefully taught. Everybody needs to see that, they need to hear that, they need to teach that song to children in school.
Yeah.
So that children in school can go home singing that song.
Right.
And then say to their fathers or mothers, see, I was taught not to treat people unfairly on the basis of the color of their skin.
There needs to be more people just like you, Elliott.
What?
There needs to be more people just like you out there.
We'd have a different president if there were.
Right.
But we don't want to put that in there. We're not going to talk politics.
Sure. Well, unless you don't want to.
Well, you don't want me to because
I would love for you to.
No, you don't want me to because then I say ugly things. Because what's going on right now is an ugly thing. What we're doing right now is absolutely unacceptable behavior in this nation that calls itself a Christian nation.
Right.
You cannot claim to be a Christian nation and follow the leader that we presently have in the White House.
Right.
There's no way. You can either be a Christian or a racist. And the Pope said many years ago, you can either be a Christian or a racist. You can't be both. If you're a Christian, you're going to have to give up your racism. If you're a racist, you have to give up your Christianity. I know people who will give up their Christianity before they'll give up their racism.
Sure.
Because they know, by living in this country, they know that racism is stronger than Christianity.
Right.
And if it isn't, then you have to explain to me why we still have these ugly things happening to people of color.
Right. Deporting individuals, doing it. And then with these recent shootings, would you say that the shootings are a direct correlation?
Of course the shootings are a direct correlation to leadership. That is a direct result of teaching people to hate.
That's an excellent point. And I wanted to bring something up to you too, so I'm not sure if you're aware. There was a video that took place back in May with President Trump where he was talking about what we're going to do with illegal immigrants. And what ended up transpiring was, more or less, is he was asking these questions at a rally, and then ultimately somebody in the crowd yelled, "We should shoot him." You've seen this? Yes.
And he said,
not even a month later.
they only do that in the flavor of Texas. He didn't say, absolutely not, and you're shooting off your mouth.
Right, that's my point.
That's what he should have said, instead of saying, well,
Yeah.
and making a joke.
You've seen that.
Of course they play it over and over and over. And I keep hoping that they're playing it to show how ignorant this man is. I have a feeling they're playing it to keep the situation alive. Because if your president finds that amusing, and if he agrees with that member of the audience that says that, then why not do it? And
Exactly.
if he refuses to take these guns away from these folks, or see to it that people who are believers in what he's saying, we need to take their guns out of their hands, or see to it that they don't get more guns. Or
Right.
perhaps what we need to do is stop making bullets.
Right.
Make all the guns you want, just don't make bullets.
Yep. Now, in the past, you mentioned that, and I'm not going to say the term white people, because we're all, as you brilliantly said, of the same race. But would you say that growing up in this society, just for the sake of conversation, I'll use white people are indoctrinated to being racist?
Well, of course we are. That's what our education is about. It's about maintaining the status quo. It's about celebrating what we have done. And think of the things we have celebrated. Invading this land, killing the people who owned it.
Christopher Columbus.
Yeah. Columbus didn't discover America. Thor Heyerdahl said you can't discover a place where people are living. They already discovered it before you got there.
Right.
He didn't discover this land. And furthermore, the Native Americans, what we call Native Americans, the people, as they call themselves, on this land, came from Africa just like all the rest of us did.
Brilliant point.
Not brilliant, common sense.
Sure.
And if y'all want to find out whether I'm wrong about that, all you have to do is go and get your DNA taken.
Sure.
And you'll find out that every person watching this, some of your DNA comes from a country in Africa.
Yeah.
Because all white folks is black folks who faded as they moved farther and farther from all that sunlight.
Can you elaborate more on that, Ms. Elliott?
What?
Can you elaborate more on that?
Well, they obviously started in sub-Saharan, and if you don't believe me, and you won't,
I believe
but
it.
I'm not doing this for you.
Sure.
We're doing this for somebody else who might watch it and
Yep.
say, maybe she has a point here. Get the April 2018 issue of the National Geographic magazine. And it will show you the map that shows how those people, those black people, moved from Africa, from sub-Saharan Africa, and populated every landmass on the face of the earth. But as they moved farther from Africa, farther north, their bodies produced less and less melanin because they were subjected to less and less sunlight.
Right.
So their hair, their skin, and their eyes got lighter. That's the reason we have pale faces like me. It's because our ancestors moved away from the equator. However, as your skin got lighter, your brain didn't get smaller.
Right.
And you need to realize that those black people, without benefit of any technology, managed to populate every landmass on the face of the earth. They and their descendants. So now do you want to talk to me about how ignorant black people are? And how we have the right to enslave them,
Right.
and to use them, and to put them in prison, and to treat them badly because we have learned. And this, you need to know that this idea of 4 or 5 different races has only been around for about 500 years.
Right.
It started with the Spanish Inquisition. Previous to that, people were just people of different colors. They weren't people of different races. And then along came Torquemada and the Spanish Inquisition. And they were killing Jews. They found out after they'd killed several thousand that many of the people they killed were Christians. So then they decided they'd have to find another way to decide who to kill. And they set upon skin color. It is that recent, and it is that ignorant, and it is that fragile. If you realize what's going to happen in this country in the next 30 years, within 30 years, white people will have become a numerical minority in the United States of America. Now, think about that. People of other color groups, of which there are 2,500 different skin colors on the face of the earth. If you can think up 2,500 different names for races, you've got too much time on your hands.
Right.
Try.
Sure.
You need to realize that within 30 years, we, rather colorless people, are going to be taking orders from those that we have thought less than for the last 500 years. We're going to learn a really valuable lesson. When I go on a college campus, somebody always says, well, if they get power, aren't they going to want to do to us what we've done to them? And I say, wait, let's find out if that's true. Now, when I did this at the University of Houston, there were 1,500 people in the audience. And Angela Davis was sitting beside me going, ooh. I don't understand it. I said, well, every black person in this room who wants to get even with all white folks, please stand. 2 young men stood. Nobody else stood. And I said, look, folks, they don't want to get even with all of you. Look at there. And those white folks look like, oh. I said, now, let's be honest about this. Well, every black person in this room who wants to get even with 1 or 2 white folks, please stand. Every one of them stood.
Right.
And laughing.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, there's my fear. I said, now, people, here's the answer. And if you want to be treated fairly in the future, don't be one of those 1 or 2 that they want to get even with today.
Right.
The way you treat people in the present will define how you are going to be treated in the future.
Right.
And then somebody will say, I get this all the time. And I heard this out of one of the politicians this morning. I know who it was, Bernie Sanders.
Right.
And he said, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. Wait a minute. If you and I got on an airplane,
Right.
and I had a piece of luggage to put in the overhead rack, and you said to me, can I put that up for you, ma'am? I'd say, yes, thank you very much. Your mother did a good job on you. I would like that. If you had a piece of luggage, and I said to you, Sonny, do you want me to put that up for you? What would you say?
If it was reversed on me, I would probably...
What would you say if I offered to put up your luggage? What would you say?
I would, well, personally, if it was you, I would probably say, I think I got it.
I'm sure you would. If it was somebody, some other, well,
Right.
what would you say?
Oh, sure.
You would?
No,
I
no
don't
kidding.
think you
I'm
would.
kidding.
Let's be, you
No, I
cannot
wouldn't.
joke about racism.
Of course.
Don't do that.
Sure.
You know you don't want to be treated the way I want to be treated.
Right.
And I don't know how you want to be treated, so I don't have the right to treat you the way I want to be treated. You might not like it.
Right.
So the golden rule doesn't work unless you're a white person.
Exactly.
If you care at all about other human beings, you practice the platinum rule. The platinum rule says, treat others as they would have you treat them.
Sure.
And in order to find out how they'd have you treat them, you have to ask them, you have to listen to the answer, and then if what they ask you to do is an immoral, indecent, or illegal, you do it. But the point of the platinum rule is you have to communicate with one another. And the problem in this country is we do not communicate across the races. And we have people convinced, and I get letters like this from people all the time. Well, you can't be mixing the races. And I think, wait a minute.
Right, right.
You can't mate a cat and a dog and get a dad or a call. But you can, people of different color groups, mate and reproduce and produce brilliant, beautiful, creative, courageous, wonderful human beings because we are all members of the same species. There's only one species of people on this earth, and that's Homo sapiens. We are all Homo sapiens. And skin color has nothing to do with intelligence, nothing to do with your worth as a human being. And I want this nonsense stopped.
Right.
Victor Hugo said, no power on earth can stop a man with a dream or an idea whose time had come. Martin Luther King Jr. had a dream. We killed him thinking we'd stop the dream.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't stop the dream. But as a result of my watching that ugliness happen and having studied Martin Luther King Jr. before, I did the blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise. And this is an idea which no power on earth is going to be able to stop.
Right.
The idea of one race, the human race, is an idea whose time has come.
Right.
That time has come, and it is time now to do away with racism.
Right.
God created one race, the human race. Human beings created racism. Anything you create, you can destroy.
Yes.
We could destroy racism in 3 generations if we decided to.
Right.
And we would be a happier, we would be, oh my God, you cannot imagine what it's like in my classroom or in a boardroom when the exercise is over. And I say, take off your collars, we're all members of the same race. And all of a sudden you find out how it could be in this country if we really practice what we think are Christian ideals. And if we really practice fairness, if we really had to suffer what other people suffer on a daily basis, then we would see to it that nobody would suffer that way again.
Right.
After I'd done the exercise at 3rd grade level, later on in the year, I say, do you want to do the blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise again? No, why not? You could be on top. No, I don't want to ever make anybody feel the way I felt the day I was on the bottom. That's education. That's leading people out of ignorance.
Right.
The reason we still have rampant racism in this country is ignorance and the refusal of educators to say, I am going to lead you out of the ignorance of racism, and I know how to do it.
Yeah.
And we all know how to do it. We simply stop teaching the lie.
Right. That's actually the funny thing. That's the name of my documentary now, A Pretty Lie Instead of an Ugly Truth, because people would rather accept a pretty lie instead of an ugly truth.
It's time to stop teaching the lie. It is damaging all of us.
I have a question for you now. Do you, and I've heard this a lot, some people on news will argue that black people or people of color can be racist. Do you believe people of color can be racist?
I believe that people of color can dislike people of less color
Sure.
because of the way we behave and the way we treat them.
Sure.
However, in order to be an effective racist, you have to have power.
Exactly.
Dislike without power is just dislike. Anger without power is just anger. We can put you in jail, and we know how to do that. All you have to do is act angry as a young black male, and we will find a reason to put you in jail because you don't have the power to keep that from happening.
So if you don't have the power, you can't be reverse racist or
You
anything.
can act like an ugly human being, but you can't force your philosophy onto everybody in the society because you don't have the power to do it.
Right. Right. So that's hogwash, essentially.
It's absolutely hogwash. We watch a lot of hogs in this country, mainly for Chinese consumption.
Now, in the past, I know you had mentioned Donald Trump, and with the election, why do you believe he was elected? Do you believe it was a response to...
Look, he wasn't elected. Get over that.
Sure.
He wasn't elected.
Sure.
Hillary Clinton got, 3 million more votes than he did?
That's correct.
He was elected once again because of ignorance. The members of the Electoral College in 4 states didn't know why Thomas Jefferson put the Electoral College into the Constitution.
Correct.
He put it in there so that no one who was unfit for the job would ever become president. Now, all those folks in those 4 states knew that this man was unfit for the job, but they thought that because the state voted that way, they had to vote the way the state did. They didn't. They should have voted the right way, and they should have voted for somebody who was fit for that job. This man wasn't, and they knew it. And when people called members of the Electoral College here in Iowa, and finally one of the women said, "Don't call me anymore. If I get any more calls, I'm going to the police with them. You people will be arrested."
Right.
Because she got enough angry calls from people who said, well, how could you do such a thing? Because that made Iowa look really bad.
Right.
We are generally smarter than that.
Right.
But he appealed to a group of Iowans who are so ignorant that they were quite certain that that one man, who probably, no, I'm not going to say that, but you need to look at this, the National Geographic magazine, and read the description of a Neanderthal person.
Sure. Say it. I would love for you to go into it. You know, listen out.
you want to read that article.
I most certainly will.
Neanderthals are stocky and bullish and bullying and are inclined to abdominal weight and have orange hair.
So that's funny.
You can do what you want to with that.
Right,
but,
right.
You know, I have a friend in California who has an uncle who says, yes, they're part Neanderthal, because obviously Homo sapiens mated with Neanderthal, and some of those people survived. Neanderthals as a group did not, but there are some of those people, and interestingly enough, they were in Western Europe and Northern Europe, like maybe from Germany.
Something else.
You want to take that out of this, please?
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Yeah, you need to remove that from this.
That's
but
funny.
I suspect that someday somebody will say, "Oh yeah,
Yeah.
now we know how that happened." Now
Exactly.
we know why he has difficulty with words.
Yep.
But then you'll study transactional analysis.
Sure.
And you'll find out that we have 3 ego states: child, parent, and adult. And you can tell which ego state a person is in by what they say. And when you read some of the statements that are made by people in their child ego state, you will find them. Just turn on the television, and there he is.
So my next question for you now, Miss Elliott, is how are race relations now when compared to your time? Have they changed? Are things worse? Are they better?
Things were getting better. And Barack Obama, the election of Barack Obama, I thought, was going to put a stop to this, because we had proof that he's intelligent and he has character and he has judgment and he has good moral standing and he had all the things that you want in a president. But he had to come up against a bunch of Republicans and Mitch McConnell, who said repeatedly, he'll never succeed, he'll never succeed, he'll never succeed. He worked really hard to keep him from succeeding. He didn't work hard enough because he got away with a whole lot of stuff that Mitch McConnell thought couldn't happen. Now we have a man who says, I will undo everything that Barack Obama did.
Right. And they made it their effort to do that.
And that is exactly what he's doing right now. Now what's he going to do for the rest of this term? He has nothing left to do. So now he's attacking immigrants from south of the border, whom he has said before, brown-skinned people reproduce too rapidly. We're talking about a man who has been told by somebody like Steve Bannon that there are too few white babies being born in this country today, and if we don't do something about this, this soon will no longer be a white man's land. And if you haven't read the book, The Birth Dearth, by Ben Wattenberg, which was written in 1987, you better get it and read it. Don't read his latest one, but read the 1987 edition of it if you can possibly get it.
Right.
And then you will understand what is happening in this country with this fool today. You need to read that. Everybody needs to read that. We just can't afford to be ignorant any longer.
Mm-hmm.
And if you haven't read The Color of Law by Rothstein, get it and read it. You don't have the right to live with this self-imposed ignorance if you want to preserve this democracy. You'd better get off your polyunsaturated fatty acids and do something.
Right.
Now, I didn't use an obscenity, but you need to realize that we are headed down the rabbit hole, and we have to stop this, and we have to stop it now.
Right. I want to take the opportunity and to ask you a quick question. How did you get into all of this, Miss Elliott? How did you start? Was your dad or your parents into this?
Oh, my father said, never judge a book by its cover. Mm-hmm. Never judge a man till you've lived his life. He also said, a man is judged by the company he keeps, and the best of companies none too good. And I think of that every day. I turn on the news, and I hear another one's going to prison because of his behaviors. And I think, Dad, if you were alive now, you would be absolutely furious.
Right.
We had studied Martin Luther King Jr. in my classroom, my third grade classroom. We had learned about all the wonderful things he had done. He was one of our heroes of the month in February, and dead in April. And we were studying the Indian unit at that time.
Right.
My kids had, the previous year's students had made a teepee. I was taking it home. I was going to wash it, dry it, iron it, and put it up in my classroom the next day. We were going to paint Indian symbols on it, sing Indian songs written by white folks, read Indian poetry written by white folks, read Indian stories written by white folks. And we were going to learn all about those folks. And I walked in my door, my door at home, carrying that teepee. And the telephone was ringing, and I answered it. My sister, she said, is your television on? I said, no. She said, you better turn it on. I said, why? She said, because they shot him. I said, who did we shoot this time? Because we were in the shooting business at that time.
Right.
She said, Martin Luther King Jr. And for an instant, my world stopped.
Right.
I swear to you, when I talk about this, I get sick to my stomach.
Right.
Because Martin Luther King, for me, represented hope. And for me, hope is an acronym for holding on to positive energy. And that's what Martin Luther King did. And here he is, dead at the hands of an assassin who's obviously been hired by somebody who wants to shut him up.
Yeah.
And I knew I was going to have to go into my classroom the next day and explain that killing. And explain first what Martin Luther King Jr. was about, why he was in the street, what he was protesting. And I fed the kids and put them to bed, washed and dried that teepee, spread it out on the living room floor, and commenced to iron it. And the television was on, and there was Walter Cronkite saying to 3 leaders of the black community, when our leader was killed, his widow held us together. Who's going to keep your people in line? I was absolutely gobsmacked. How could that intelligent, erudite, educated man make such a remark, ask such a question of those 3 black males?
Yeah.
So I changed the channel, thinking I'll find somebody who isn't going to do that. And there sat, I believe it was Harry Reasoner, saying to 3 black males, don't you Negroes think you should feel sympathy for us white people because we can't feel the anger at this killing that you Negroes can? And I turned it off, and I rolled that teepee up, and I threw it on the floor of the closet. I closed the door, and I came out and got ready for my husband, who worked nights at a tractor company 30 miles away. And I decided that the next morning, we were to learn the Sioux Indian prayer that says, "Oh, Great Spirit, keep me from ever judging a man until I've walked a mile in his moccasins." I decided that the next morning, not only would I teach that prayer to my children, my students, I would arrange to have it answered for them. Because I decided then that the next day, some of my students were going to walk in the shoes of a person of color in this country for a day.
Right.
I didn't know how this would work, and I didn't know what to use, but I knew that Hitler decided, one of the ways that Hitler decided who would win the gas chamber was eye color. If you had a good German name but you had brown eyes, they threw you into the gas chamber because they thought you might be a Jewish person who was trying to pass.
Right.
So at that point I decided tomorrow. And I have blue eyes. So blue-eyed people had to be on the bottom because I couldn't have the power structure be with the top. So I decided at that point, blue-eyed people were going to be subjected for a day to what black children are subjected to for a lifetime in this country. I didn't know how this exercise would work. If I had known how it would work, I probably wouldn't have done it. If I had known that my children were going to be beaten and spit upon and mistreated about, not only by their peers, but by their teachers and the parents of their peers, I wouldn't have done that exercise. If I had known that my parents would lose their business because nobody would eat in the restaurant owned by the people who raised the town's only N-word lover, I wouldn't have done that exercise.
Right.
If I had known that my father would die totally isolated in the community in which his great-grandfather was one of the first settlers, and isolated because he raised me, I wouldn't have done that exercise. But if I had known that no teacher would speak to me for 12 years in that system, because it wasn't good politics to be seen talking to the N-word lover, if I'd known that, I might have done the exercise sooner. I found out I had a whole lot more time to teach when I was no longer included in their hall conferences.
Right.
And my internal environment was a lot less polluted when I no longer had to listen to their racist, sexist, ageist, homophobic, ethnocentric statements. But I didn't know. And so before I went to sleep that night, I said the only prayer I said at that time, which was, Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Lord, make me, I said it over and over like a mantra. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Unfortunately, my prayer got answered. I think, but I'm not sure. I went into my classroom the next day and separated my students after we had talked about the fact that somebody killed that shot that kid last night. I said, we're going to talk about that. So then we started to talk about it. And it wasn't sticking. And I said, okay, let's do some real education here. You have any idea, kids have any idea how the field will be treated unfairly because of the color of your skin? No. Would you like to know? Yeah. Would you like to do something today that will help you know that? Yeah. It was like we've already gotten out of spelling and handwriting.
Right.
Keep this broad talk and we don't have to learn anything. So I said, all right, today we're going to judge people by the color of their eyes.
Sure.
And since I'm blue-eyed, and most of the students in this room are blue-eyed people are going to be on the bottom the first day. What do you mean? I said, I mean blue-eyed people aren't as smart as brown-eyed people. They aren't as clean as brown-eyed people, they aren't as civilized as brown-eyed people. I applied to blue-eyed people all the negative stereotypes that we have and continue to apply. It used to be just blacks and Native Americans, but now it's Muslims and people with brown skin from south of the border who might reproduce too rapidly. And immediately, within 5 minutes, I created a microcosm of society in my classroom. The third year I did that exercise, ABC filmed it and produced a film called The Eye of the Storm.
Right.
People who see that film today need to look at it and realize that what I did that day in my third grade classroom is what we are doing in the United States today. I copied Adolf Hitler. You need to make that connection. What we're doing today is very similar to what Adolf Hitler did.
Right.
And President Roosevelt said, when somebody said, what are you going to do about Adolf Hitler? He said, leave that man alone. He's dealing with the problem the rest of us don't want to deal with. If you read the book, The Myth of Race, by Robert Wald Sussman, you will understand exactly how this is perpetuated, how it started, and how it is perpetuated. And you'll also find out how to stop it. And the answer to this whole problem is education.
Education.
Not schooling, not training. Education. We need to lead students of every age out of ignorance, and we need to start yesterday.
Yeah. So I have a question I wanted to ask you as well. There have been people out there who have criticized your work. I have
Really?
said,
Really think they have? Name one.
Pat Sykes comes to mind. He's
Whoever
a guy,
that is.
yeah, some guy in England. He was a professor. He said that some of your stuff is morally unethical.
Of course it's morally unethical.
My question was going to be, how do you respond to that?
Oh, somebody always says to me, how could you do that to those poor little white children for a day? And I say, Apply that with the sympathy you have for those little white children for a day, to whom it's being done so that they could learn something positive about their future.
Right.
Apply that to why we do it to children of color, pre-birth and post-death.
Mm-hmm.
We don't start with you, we don't wait until you're born to do it in this country. The behaviors that are exhibited up to women of color in delivery rooms in this country are very different from the way colorless women are treated in delivery rooms in this country. And I know that because some women who deliver babies in homes, midwives, called me and asked me if I would come and talk to their group. I said, why would you ask me to talk to your group? I know nothing about medical situation. I only know about delivering babies because I have 4. But I didn't do the job on them. I just was there. So I really don't know why you would want to ask me. And they said, because we need to have women in the delivery room or delivering babies in homes who will treat people of color as well as they treat white people. I said, if that's the reason you want me to come and talk to you, I'll be glad to come and talk to you about that. And I did. And they said, in that group, there were probably 60 people in that group. All of them have become, they're all registered nurses, and they become midwives because they see what is wrong in delivery rooms and they think something has to be done. And one of the things that can be done is have somebody in those delivery rooms who does not see skin color as a negative.
Right.
And who thinks that that little boy who is other than melanin challenged is going to be just as good a citizen, just as intelligent, just as worthy as those other children.
Right. So for people out there who say, and that brings me to another topic that I have as well, for people out there who say, oh, why are we talking about, race relations? I don't see the color of a person's skin. I don't see.
Yeah.
How do you feel about
People,
that, Miss Elliott? You hear that. I hear that all the time. Sid, I don't see you being black. I don't see color.
I don't see black.
Yeah, exactly.
Or this one, a teacher will stand up in front of a group of students and
Right.
say, I don't care whether you're black, brown, red, yellow, or green with purple polka dots.
Right.
I'm going to treat you all alike. And at that point, some student needs to say, have you ever seen anybody who was green with purple polka dots? Because if you have, you must have come from another planet.
Right.
Because human beings don't come in that color. And then some other young person is going to stand up and say, you forgot to say white in there. Don't you see white?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When some woman says to me, I don't see color, I'm colorblind. I said, I knew that before you said it, because if you weren't colorblind, you wouldn't wear that blouse with those pants. And then she gets angry and storms away as if I have said something offensive. Or the woman, I'll never forget the woman who raised her hand and said, I just look for the person's heart.
Right.
And everybody went, I said, well, madam, if you can see my heart from where you're standing, you should go down to the local hospital and volunteer to be their x-ray machine. You can save them a whole bunch of money. She was furious. She said, you know what I mean? I said, I know exactly what you mean. You have to deny that person's color in order for you to see them as being worthy of you recognizing them at all. That's what you mean.
Right.
Let me make no mistake about this. It doesn't matter what you meant by what you said. What matters is how it is perceived. And if what you are saying can be perceived as racist, change what you're going to say.
Right.
Everybody knows that there are hundreds of thousands of words in the English language. If you can't find something that isn't racist to say, you better get another dictionary.